Students at two Kansas campuses are on edge after learning a serial rapist may be on the loose. Police believe the same man is responsible for 13 rapes that occurred over the past 8 years. Those attacks happened near Kansas State University and the University of Kansas. All of the rapes took place near the campuses and during break.
It is really scary because, you don't even know. You might just walk out of your front door one morning and then be assaulted or something like that, and you can't predict it. And there's nothing you can do because if he's been around for this long and they still haven't caught him, you never know what's going to happen.
My name is Tim Haggerty. I grew up dreaming about being a police officer. Police shows were my favorite, but when you grow up wanting to be a police officer or an astronaut or a fireman, life happens and you become a high school teacher, which is where I found myself. And I did that for about 8 years, and I decided at age 30 I was going to quit my job. I didn't have another job lined up. I rolled the dice, and 30 years later, I'm still in law enforcement now. I had a career with the Riley County Police Department because they were the first ones to offer me a job. I was living in the area. Manhattan, Kansas is the Little Apple. That's its nickname. In fact, there's at least one occasion where I think it's true that someone got off the airplane at the Manhattan Regional Airport only to realize they weren't in Manhattan, New York. So that's kind of the joke sometimes. It's the home of Kansas State University. So a lot of people will know, if they're sports fans, Kansas State Wildcats. Fort Riley military installation is nearby. It's currently the home of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. It's a mostly rural county. I think 610 odd square miles, 614, something like that. Manhattan is the county seat. Currently 55,000 people, and the Riley County Police Department is a consolidated agency, so there's no sheriff's office, there are no other police departments. It was in October of 2000. It was kind of what we would classify in policing as a home invasion. So somebody breaks in the middle of the night, does not end up carrying out the act for some reasons that are specific to the investigation, so I can't get into that. But this is reported. The victim calls, and the Riley County Police Department responds. And this case was kind of unusual in that it was the 3rd floor of an apartment complex, mostly student housing, just off campus, adjacent to Kansas State University. No signs of forced entry. The victim told us that to her knowledge, everything was locked, and suddenly, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, this person appears. And we admittedly did not investigate the case very well. It just seemed so unusual that, and I wasn't directly involved with the case at this time, this particular case. We questioned her truthfulness because it was just so odd, it didn't seem real. And that's one of the things that you learn when dealing with assault victims is you don't question them, you don't call them liars, you don't question their truthfulness. We did, simply because it was not the kind of case that you saw in Manhattan, Kansas. We generally had anywhere from 20 to 50 rapes reported every year, and almost all of them were acquaintance, meaning the victim knew the offender. A true stranger rape was not something that happened very often at all. So we weren't very experienced in investigating that kind of case, and so we probably didn't do a very good job in collecting evidence. The second one, I believe, was August of 2001, right before I arrived, was transferred to the division. So that was my first experience with the case, and I think we recognized immediately that there were similarities. It was in the same building, and again, very little evidence, the same kind of MO, same physical description. We had the same MO. Same location. I believe it might have been another 3rd floor apartment. No witnesses. So we knew the first victim was being truthful. And this one was an actual rape, as opposed to the first one, which was categorized as an aggravated burglary because no physical assault took place. So we actually were dealing with a rape. So this one was much more an involved investigation. It simply led nowhere, as the first one had. It led nowhere. The next one led nowhere, but by then we knew we had a problem on our hands. We had the same offender. I'm not sure if we were thinking in terms of we have a serial offender and this is going to continue to happen. I don't know that we were thinking that, again, because this was not something that happened in Manhattan, Kansas. So it probably took us a little bit by surprise. Oh, wow, I guess we have an issue. And then how to deal with that, disseminating the information to the public, to the university population. So we had 2 university students, very similar in attributes. As I said, we worked it much better than the first one. Obviously, I've read every case, so I can tell you this second one was very thoroughly investigated, but again, led to nothing. We had another one in 2003 as well, and of course, and again, the first 3 were in the same apartment complex. So we knew we had the same person. Again, very thorough investigation on the third one, but led to nowhere. The MO, which is modus operandi, the method of operation, the timing was generally about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, typically when the body is in the most deepest form of sleep. It was no signs of forced entry. The offender woke the victim, typically had a weapon, a handgun. Sometimes it was described as an automatic, sometimes semi-automatic, sometimes it was described as a revolver. Masked, gloved, brought everything that they used during the commission of the crime with them, took everything that they used with them as they left. Apparently having a second layer of clothing, like typically described as bulky, and from all the elements of the cases, we suspect that this clothing was discarded quickly thereafter and had another pair of clothing to confuse any witnesses. Generally, the same kind of things were said, the same kind of things were done. Physical description, again, generally the same, 5'10" to 6 feet, 180 pounds, fairly muscular. So a couple of very common things were muscular thighs and kind of a paunch, a beer belly is what many people, victims described. But so we knew there were enough consistent similarities in everything that, as I said, right from the second one and then on, we were dealing with the same person. The victim generally had roommates who were away during some type of break in school, whether it's a summer holiday, whether it was over Easter break, there were some over Thanksgiving break. So there was always, that was another part of the pattern. The victim lived with somebody else, but that somebody else wasn't there because the school wasn't in session and the victim had stayed behind. So we knew that those time frames were the most likely to produce another attack. So our messaging became consistent during school breaks, summer breaks, Christmas, Thanksgiving, spring break, Easter. We regularly put out public service announcements at those times. We developed protocols on how to respond to these. We would sometimes, again, I'm saying collective we, but the patrol division, for example, would often practice how they might respond. We knew the typical location, so the first 3 attacks were in one apartment complex, and then the next 3 were in a second complex, but again, the same. So the first 6 series were spread across 2 different apartment complexes, not very far apart from each other. Obviously, you know, someone could ask, hey, did you look at management? Did you look at all the names of people who were living there? And the answer is yes. We had stacks and stacks and stacks of names. And this was, again, early 2000s. Most everything was in paper. Databases, computer databases were in their infancy. Evidence processing, particularly when it comes to DNA, was kind of in its infancy as well, and we were a smaller agency. We had an idea of when things might happen. We had an idea of typically where they were happening, in apartment complexes that predominantly housed college students. We just didn't know exactly when. So many of these attacks were months and even sometimes years apart. So there was no real way to decipher a pattern, like, okay, we know within the next 14 days, or, it didn't lend itself to that kind of temporal analysis. The investigative process, when it came to crime scene processing, for example, or DNA or evidence collection, as it became more advanced, we became more advanced. Over time, we sent countless items to labs, not only in Kansas with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, but to labs with the FBI, private labs. We use some private labs for certain processing. In short, eventually we would explore more avenues than people can imagine. We were often asked or questioned about what we were doing on the case. Why haven't you solved this case? Why aren't you working on this case? And the reality was we couldn't tell people, and still, because it's an active case, still can't tell people everything that we did. Someday, for the sake of the survivors, I would like them to know every avenue that we tried. I'm simply not in a position to do that right now. But we tried some unusual things. We looked at every avenue that we could think of. Obviously, as databases became more advanced, we were feeding information into these databases to try to find links and connections and patterns that to standard shuffling through paper you couldn't find. We made use of geographic profiles. We made use of psychological profiles for offenders. The FBI did one for us. The United States Marshal Service did one for us. But again, most of it led to nowhere, which is where we're at right now. And there were a lot of guesses along the way. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had a theory, but until we ever identify the offender, they're all guesses and they're all theories. I think there's some things that haven't yet been employed that could be, and that I have recommended. Obviously, I retired in 2021, so I haven't had a connection with the case in some time. I will still reach back on occasion and offer a suggestion as I come across new things in my career in criminal justice and in law enforcement. I think we tried most everything that was available to us. And money was never an object, by the way. If we had to use private labs, we had to use private labs. We never looked at this thing from a standpoint of, well, we can't afford to do that. We tried everything that we could think of. We brought in, as I said, experts. Many people will know the FBI's behavioral analysis unit from Silence of the Lambs, but we employed the behavioral analysis unit with the FBI. And was it any help? Hasn't been. There was an attack that happened over the Easter weekend in 2007. And I was with my family. This is the day before Easter. An incident occurred. I got a call from my lieutenant. I was the commander of the Criminal Investigation Division. This one, I believe, happened in Lawrence. But I got a call from my lieutenant, and a cell phone had been recovered, possibly the offender's cell phone. So I told my family, I've got to go back. And so I jumped in our van, and this was about an hour and a half from Manhattan. And I took off and was very hopeful this could be the break. And I got a call about 2/3 of the way there that said, no. It turns out it was, I don't know if it was the victim's cell phone or if it was an unrelated cell phone, but it wasn't. It was I think it was a boyfriend's cell phone. And so it was a false alarm. And that was as close as I think we came to a near miss, and it really wasn't one. For a moment, it looked like finally, and it just didn't happen. We had a wonderful relationship with the Lawrence Police Department. In fact, when their first incident occurred, I think it was in June of 2004, they immediately knew it was related because the survivor went to the hospital for an exam, a sexual assault exam, and the SANE nurse, which I believe is sexual assault nurse evaluator, maybe examiner, sexual assault nurse examiner, she worked in Riley County as well. And the nurse, immediately recognized, examining nurse, hey, this is, in listening to the victim, this is what's happening in Riley County. So their investigations division contacted ours, and we, as I said, immediately put it together, and okay, we have the same offender. So that began a very close relationship. The main difference between us and the Lawrence Police Department is that for us, the supervisors and the investigators kind of moved in and out of this case as people got transfers, people got promoted. We didn't consistently have the same core players throughout the whole series. For the most part, the Lawrence Police Department did. Detective Amy Price and Detective Greg Pruitt were the primary investigators throughout the entire series, and they did a fabulous job. The coordination, I think, was excellent. There was no interagency rivalry. Everyone was just about one goal, was identifying the offender, and doing whatever we could to bring a person to justice. And eventually, very late in the series, and this was in around 08, 09, the AG's office, Attorney General's office, started playing a major role. They got us some funding, helped us to purchase some software to manage the case, and then things went cold for 6 years. The atmosphere, you would be surprised at the number of students who weren't aware of anything. Even though, as I said, by 2002, we were regularly pushing out public service announcements over college breaks, and of course never stopped that throughout the course of the series. As college would come into session, we would often have an investigator go meet with incoming students. We would push out stories to local papers, but it was never really covered by anyone outside of Manhattan and Lawrence. Never really got any national attention until 2017. So it was kind of one of those things. It was really weird for us. It was one of the biggest things we were dealing with, and for the community, as I said, some people knew about it intimately. Some people didn't know about it at all. That was kind of an odd thing. I can't explain it. For the most part, and I hope no one with the Manhattan Mercury takes any offense at this, but it was a small local newspaper, and there were no investigative journalists with the Manhattan Mercury. It just wasn't that kind of paper. It wasn't that kind of community that called for investigative journalism. Lawrence didn't have that really either. So the attention we got from local media, certainly at the time of an incident, we would get questions from stations in Topeka, maybe Wichita, maybe on occasion Kansas City, but it was fairly confined to our community. And so we never really got a lot of pushback as far as not releasing things, again, until 2017. And there's kind of a long story to that, but it's an important one. So we had an incident in 2015 in Manhattan, in the same apartment complex where the second three events. So we had three in one complex, and the next three were in another. And so this incident in 2015 happened in this second apartment complex where there were three other attacks. And it wasn't a completed attack, just kind of like the first one. So it was an aggravated burglary, technically, is how we would categorize it. And I wasn't involved with criminal investigations at the time. I was actually in charge of the crime analysis unit as one of my duties. And so when I read the case file, I immediately knew this is the same person, after 6 years of silence. Not everyone agreed with me. In fact, most people didn't. And so 2 years later, this is the spring of 2017, I'm getting ready to take over criminal investigations again. I'm being transferred back there as a captain. So I meet with the Lawrence Police Department to find out, where are we at with this case. And I discovered for the first time that a consensus was reached that they were dealing with the same person, and had kind of reached that conclusion about a year prior. So I was really taken aback. We've known about this for a year and we haven't done anything about it. So I immediately went to my chief and said, we need to hold a press conference to let the public know that this event in 2015 is related to that series that we had from 2000 to 2008. And thus began about a month or two of communications between our agency and between the Lawrence Police Department. Obviously, we wanted to be on the same page with them. Everyone needed to be in agreement. And by and large, everybody was. It didn't take much convincing for either side to realize we had to go public, but it was how to do that, and to do it in a way that was sensitive to the survivors, in a way that didn't reveal elements of the investigation that could compromise an eventual prosecution. So one of the things that we did is we partnered with the Marshal Service, and they helped us build a website solely dedicated to this. The website was called the Kansas College Rapist. I have no idea whether it's up and running or not. I haven't checked in years. But so it took some time to build it, because we wanted to unroll this website, to have it as a platform for all the information that we could publish about this, to have a platform to receive tips. So it was kind of a one-stop shop. So we had to build that up. And then I think it was July of 2017, we held a joint press conference at the Riley County Police Department, and announced to the media that yes, we had a related attack in 2015, and we had built this website, that our goal was, number one, to let the public know, so increase public awareness, and to solicit any information from the public on any unreported attacks that were related. Our hope was, if something had happened that someone hadn't reported yet, that this might prompt them to report. And then finally, to generate additional clues, additional leads for us to follow up on. There was one news outlet, Kansas City Star. I remember they did an editorial afterwards, and were not very complimentary to me personally. Their take was, you guys sat on this for 2 years, and that's not very responsible of you as a police agency. And of course, they didn't know the whole story. It took some time to be able to determine that the two were, we wanted to be pretty sure, by the way. In fact, really sure before we came out and said, this is the same one. And so that took about a year, because there were some significant differences as well. So it wasn't like, oh, everything is exactly the same, this is it. But for someone who had read every case, to me, it was the guy, but it wasn't exactly the same guy. And that took some time. That took about a year. And then I learned about it that following spring. I honestly can't account for that delay and why it wasn't made public earlier. I wasn't involved at that time. I think it should have been made public earlier than it did. And I responded to the Kansas City Star, and I tried to lay out for them why it took some time, and it wasn't us twiddling our thumbs or being irresponsible. It was actually us being responsible, because we wanted to make sure if we were going to tell people that we still had an active serial rapist in the community, we wanted to be pretty darn sure that we knew what we were talking about. And so once we were sure that we knew what we were talking about, then it was, how do we unroll this in a way that is constructive, in a way that may further the investigation, in a way, as I said, that's sensitive to the survivors, many of whom had moved on after so much time, and we didn't want to disrupt the lives that they had built. So that was about the only time where there was some friction in the media, and it was primarily just that one source. And I understand, don't blame the Kansas City Star for how it responded. We simply couldn't provide them the information that would help everything make sense to them. So the last attack, completed attack, was in December. I think it was December 2nd or December 1st of 2008. And then we stood up a task force the next year with the help of the Attorney General's office. I talked about that. And I can't tell you how many years passed before it became clear that, okay, this is really not going to go anywhere, is it? Not that we weren't actively looking at things. I'm not sure at what point it really, in our minds, became a cold case, how many years it took between '08 and 2015. And obviously it was a surprise in 2015, 2016 when we pieced everything together and realized we had this other incident that was related to all of these. But even though it was kind of, I categorize it as a cold case, there was work constantly being done on it. Maybe not on a daily basis, maybe not on a weekly basis, but certainly every month. And I can just say from my own experience, I never stopped digging into people, to names. A name would come up. In whatever downtime I had, I would pull up, the list of most likely names. And by most likely, it was really all based upon where people lived, when they went to school, and their physical descriptors. And that's all that made a name likely. Nothing criminal. In fact, we suspected that the offender had no criminal history whatsoever. His profile just did not fit the someone who had been arrested, had been in jail, had been in prison. This wasn't that kind of offender. There was a time where I thought it could be solved. I still believe there's a possibility. I believe that the name of the offender is somewhere in our documentation. We simply need the right tool to examine that. So, social networking analysis, artificial intelligence now, which is something that we didn't have. So, I mean, I wouldn't bet my paycheck, but I certainly would gamble that if we were to feed everything into the right artificial intelligence source, we might find some results. We might find some names that definitely were worth looking at. So I think of all the things out there that could further it, AI, and I don't know if that's ever been explored. I know someone reached out to me about this case when I was working in Honolulu. Someone who was developing an AI platform, and they were actually just asking general AI use in law enforcement, and had reached out to me for some reason. I can't even tell you why they picked me. But then I shared with him this case, and I said, wouldn't it be great if you could build an AI source that could help us narrow down a list of potential names, and I won't even call them suspects, they're just names that we'd really want to dig deeper into and maybe find the person. So I think there's still a way that it can be done. I don't know whether anyone has the desire to do it, or certainly the money to spend on it. So I think it can be solved. With each year, I grow less confident that it will be solved. Prior to, I think it's about 2012, the statute of limitation for rape was 5 years. There definitely was a limit on it. And one of the survivors in this series actually testified in front of the legislature, the Kansas legislature, to try to influence them to change the statute to remove any limitation on prosecution, which they eventually did. So that means there is one case in this series, the one from 2015, that is available, even though it was filed as an aggravated burglary and not as a rape or attempted rape. I think it could be refiled that way based upon the totality of the circumstances. So regardless, there's one case that provides potential, but only one case, and that's unfortunate for the survivors of the other ones. As I said, many of them have, probably most of them have moved on, and I totally understand that. And one of the things that I hope, first of all, I would be happy if none of them ever heard this. And if they do, my hope is it doesn't reopen wounds. But I take these opportunities because it hasn't been solved. And if spending some time talking about it could in some way motivate someone to explore an avenue that we haven't explored yet, or to come forward, or maybe someone even knows the offender and hasn't reported that and may come across this. So any chance that there is that we could further the case, I would take it. Talking about it now is a reminder of something I wasn't able to accomplish. I wanted to be able to help solve this case before I retired from law enforcement. And even up until the month that I retired, I was working on another avenue of investigation. I don't think that avenue's ever been followed up on. So I never gave up on it. Every now and then when I have some time, I will look over my old files. I kept a lot of things digitally from the case, and I will dig into some names. There was always that hope that, and I can't count the number of times where I looked at someone and saw something, yes, this, and you dig and you hope this is going to be the guy, this is going to be the guy, and then something pops up to tell you, no, this isn't the person. So it reminds me of a disappointment, and not for me, but for the survivors. This is it's one thing in a newspaper to read about things that are labeled sexual assault or even rape. It's another thing to hear the survivors talk about what actually was done to them, and to read about it, and to realize how devastating that was in the life of a 19, 20, 20-year-old young adult. And I have daughters. And that, anyone who has daughters who knew about this case, you realize how easily somebody can become a victim. So I never stopped trying to help survivors of sexual assault. Obviously, there are a lot of things I would say to this person. They did some horrendous things. They damaged lives in a way I don't think they can imagine. I don't know what kind of person. I have no idea who this person is. Are they really a monster like a Dennis Rader was, the BTK killer in Wichita? Are they? Part of me just wants to know how they did things, how they got away with things, how they selected the targets. I mean, there's that aspect of it. Like, how did you do it? And then there's the wanting to bring that person to justice aspect of it, and wonder, do they really know the kind of horrible things that they did? I can tell you, if this person was watching, I would say to them that there are no secrets. Everything gets revealed at some point, whether it's in this life or the next. And if they have any hope for the next, revealing the truth in this life is their best bet. And there's still a chance for that person to be redeemed. But they have to own what they've done. They have to repent. They have to tell the truth. For the sake of the people they harmed, for the sake of their own soul. Yeah, that's an I. I've talked about this a lot. No one has ever asked me that question, and so it's kind of thrown me off a little. I don't really know. I've never really thought about it, but I certainly would like to have the opportunity someday. I would like to say this to the survivors. I don't know if they'll ever know that every length that we went to. And because it's an active case, I can't talk about the lengths that we went to. But we did everything within our power. We took some very unusual avenues. We took some risks. We tried everything that we knew to try. We reached out to people that I think at first blush you'd think, what would that person be able to provide? If there was somebody that I thought could help us, I reached out to that person. I would want them to know that we tried, that Greg Pruitt, that Amy Price, that Dave Ross, that Ryan Runyon, that Darla King, that Carla Schwartz, Scott Hayek, and those are just a handful of the names. Alan Reinecker, these are names of police officers with the Riley County Police Department, with the Lawrence Police Department, who worked tirelessly at times. Not for themselves, but for the survivors. And I would just like them to know that we did everything we could. And I'm extremely sorry that we failed. And I hope that they're at peace.